So, hello everybody. Thanks a lot for coming. We were a bit anxious that if we offer these kind of lectures, conversations in the morning, that you would prefer to sleep longer to not show up. Obviously, it wasn't a complete disaster yesterday, so you decided to come back. It's very nice. I actually already gave a lecture within this context, which is recorded on our YouTube channel, which was called How Networking Works. So the basic idea was that you could start your considerations from your own situation and reflect on what kind of skills you're having, what your personal how to say, condition is like, you know, because living as an artist in this world of production and presentation touring as artists, you should know very well if you're the right person for this or that producing system. And I talked a little bit about things like how it is when you're young and you're considering yourself where I want to go to. Am I an artist who wants to create more, or am I the kind of artist that wants to collaborate with people and, I don't know, share in the process but not being responsible? And things like, I don't know, do I want to have a family? Do I want to live that nomadic life as an artist, living from my luggage for quite a while in my life, being in different places, meeting different people, but not always being at home? Then am I the kind of person that is able to spend a lot of time in solitude? Because also this might be something you have to offer for your life as a professional. So I'm concentrating in this other lecture more on this kind of issues, how to think about yourself, and how to position yourself and to develop your future career from your personal point of view. For example, my ex-wife, who was a dancer, she was afraid of flying, you know, and everybody told her, why don't you go and audition with Rosas, we just talked about, Anne-Therese Kersmacher. And as a matter of fact, she was not able to do that because working with Anne-Therese Kersmacher means spending a half of your life in hotels and airplanes and trains or whatever, but always traveling, touring a lot, and it's a different way of living. So I think it's good to be conscious about that. If you want to hear more about that, maybe you go on our YouTube channel. We have a special playlist which is called Solid Ground Challenging Space, and there you can also get a lot of information about production or financing, how to get your first production done or things like that. So we have a lot of practical information on that. So this time I wanted to concentrate my conversation with you more on networking and politics. Yeah? Because I'm also a lot of my time involved in this, and if I'm asking myself why I'm addressing this, maybe the starting question would be, or the starting thought would be, if we are living in an ideal world, we come up with an idea, somebody takes it up, says, great, let's do it together. I have a space, I have money, I have possibilities to offer, let's do it together, and we go for it. This still exists, yeah, but it's very seldom. And the question is more like, what do you do if you don't find that situation? So how can you go further when the going gets tough, or when you get the feeling nobody has been waiting for you? I mean, there are always, I don't want to frustrate you, there are always the possibilities to have easy access to things. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, you do your final piece for a presentation in your school, academy, university, and somebody comes and says, what a great artist you are, can I present your work? That happened, for example, with a young guy from Muck, I know. Then the director of Impulstanz came and said like, hey, can we do something together? Now he's on the poster of Impulstanz, and he has not yet finished, I think. Yeah? So there are these beautiful stories, but the question is more like, how do we do if it doesn't go that well? And I think networking and politics are important tools, not only for you individually, but for you to change the situation in the environment you're working in. So maybe we should concentrate a little bit on the issue of networking. Maybe then it would be useful to talk about politics, and maybe to give you a short introduction why I'm addressing these issues. So the funny thing is that when I meet people, they constantly think or repeatedly think that my life has been planned as a professional, has been planned from the scratch, because I was so much involved in creating structures for dance in Munich, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Austria, and also on the international level. But actually, when I think about my own history, it's a history of troubleshooting. Yeah. So whenever I was facing a problem, and maybe to start with the situation when I was a friend of my teacher here at Ivanson School, which was a few hundred meters down the street at Hansastraße 12 before, and I took jazz dance classes there every Tuesday night. And my teacher was studying at Ivanson and dancing with Jessica Ivanson at that time. And so I got involved with the dance community, and since there were some young dancers complaining about the situation in Munich with two elderly choreographers who were sharing the market or the public funding, and for the youngers there was no way to get resources to perform, no possible space where you could do your performance, no rehearsal space, and if you didn't ask one of the two big ladies and you were not in favor of one of them, then you didn't have a chance to make a piece in the city. So everybody sat together complaining, and I took out a pen and a piece of paper and I noted the complaints. And in the end, everybody showed at me and said that, hey, you can write. No, I'm kidding. So I took the notes. In the end, everybody said like, okay, now we have to have a paper to make sure what our needs are. And can't you write a paper? And this is the way I got involved with politics without even knowing what that is. But this was actually the beginning of Munich as a larger dance community. But we all didn't know. We were sitting in a bar complaining to each other. So, I tell you this personal anecdote because I think that's maybe the most important thing in the beginning. If you're facing problems in your city or in the context you're working in, right now you are in schools, academies, universities, which is, in my opinion, a rather protected area, because there is a schedule, there are some teachers, there is a policy of the dance formation you're in. So many things are pre-thought for you, prepared for you, which is sometimes not so nice, because you think like I would like to do it differently, but it's also helpful that there is somebody who gave you a structure already. When you finish your formation, you will have to create that for yourself. The easy access would be to audition somewhere, or to, I don't know, go to a workshop, meet an important choreographer who has got the means to give you a paid job. That's the easy access, but that might mean that you're in a less self-defined circumstances in your future life as a professional, because then you're again in a given structure. Yeah. So the reality for most of the artists is like if you're working in the independent scene, you're having constantly to redefine the situation you're in. And it's not only your choice that you're giving. I mean, like Aniko said yesterday, you know, like there are sometimes situations where you think like, I want to go there, but then you get an offer here. So you have to reconsider, am I taking this offer, or do I want to follow that direct line? And I have experienced quite a few artists also in the field that by just following their line and bumping against walls all the time, they also can collect a big chunk of frustrations, yeah, because always bumping against the same hinderness, obstacle, thank you, doesn't bring you any further. So I, for myself, always imagine the power of water, yeah, because if the water goes against a rock, it finds a way to go around it, and step by step, either there's a way to go around, or if there's a lot of water, you can push away the rock. Yeah. So, and I think that's somehow like describing in a little image the possibilities of networking. And so our situation at the time when I began was finding a rehearsal space, finding some teachers that would come into the city and teach the younger artists what to do. That's a different system than the system they learned here. And finding means to produce and to present work. So basically everything you need if you want to work as an independent artist. And I don't tell you the further story, but I maybe would like to stick with this original idea. What you have to do when you start networking is maybe to describe the circumstances and the problems you're facing at this very moment. And these might be changing from step to step in your career. So if you would consider your situation now, I mean, you're still, except of you, I don't know if there's anybody else who already finished school, but you're still in the institutes yourself. So if you imagine when you're leaving your school, what is it that you would be looking for? So do you already have an idea about that? Yeah?
I think it depends on.
Can you try to speak as loud so that the people over here can hear it?
For me, one thing important is to know which structure can support us already, like without searching new ones. If we know that, for example, we just left the school, is the school available to, like, I know that, for example, at CNDC there's still some availability to take some studios after the new student, or there's some administrative help. So we know that we have some contacts inside the school that are like kind and human, that can help us like to search what's already in like possible to grab and what's already here before searching new things. That's what I would have.
So you're basically saying that in your school there are already people with experience, with connections that could bring you further. I think that's a very important thing, that in the beginning you really have to look at your given situation locally, because you might be surprised how much the people are connected that you're working with, even your teachers, you know. I mean, I yesterday found out that Sandra Marin, who is teaching here, is meanwhile one of the directors of the school in Barcelona. I didn't know myself. So, normally I wouldn't have invited her because we don't want the directors here. So, no, because we want you as a free person here, not as part of your system. Yeah. Yeah, but this is a very important thing. Think about who's there and who could help you further with the question you're having. Yeah, that's true. So, anything else? Any other things that you might think you need and you don't find in the city where you are? I mean, sometimes you're studying in cities where you're not going to be based later on, I guess, right?
For example, I know that I don't want to stay in Munich.
Yes.
And once for the city, now it's fine, but and also I feel like it would be good for me to get away from this, because here in Munich everything in dance is so based on Tanzen for me.
Oh yes.
So it's like, if I want to get away from that and find my own way after, I feel like I have to not be so close to the school. And I try to like go to profi training in other cities or like take workshops and get to know people there. Because of course now like everything is based here, so I have to like meet people.
That's an interesting perspective. So, from your perspective, the city of the dance field in the city of Munich is very much based on the Evanson School.
Not necessarily, but from where I'm standing right now,
Okay.
like everybody knows Evanson, everybody knows some teachers, and where people have studied here before, and it's everything is still so connected to this school in some ways that I feel like it would be interesting to.
It's an interesting observation for me also, because even I am connected to Evanson, because I didn't take a dance formation here, but I took jazz dance classes Tuesday evenings once a week. And I'm a friend of Jessica and Stefan. But the funny thing is, people are maybe based here, but some people develop further, and even if you think they are connected to your school, they might have very different ideas about dance because they also made a further development. So it's very good to adjust to the preconception you might be having about the situation in a city. Even if there are people in a city where you think like the school is really defining everything, there might be people who have had a difficult relationship with this city, for example. So I don't know, I felt like in the beginning, because you take this example, there were people from the Evanson school who left the school and started a career as a choreographer because they wanted to do something different. For example, take somebody like Micha Puruka, who was for many, many years the best funded choreographer. He was the biggest rebel within the system of Evanson School, and he started other things because he was against that system. I think it's important, that's also what Annika said yesterday, to start with a conversation and to find out about it. It's also good to go out and try it elsewhere, to have a different reflection on the place where you have been before. Because sometimes you might think like, I'm really in the province of dance because I'm in the city. I have to go to a bigger city and find out how it's there. The interesting thing might be that you find out they are also cooking with water there. Yeah. So sometimes you leave your city and you find out it looks great from outside, but it's maybe more difficult inside. But then you possibly come back with a different knowledge. So I think your approach is very clever, to first go outside and see what's the circumstances there. I also, when I worked in the field here, I learned a lot by traveling abroad. I mean, Aniko was talking about IETM yesterday. IETM is the Informal European Theatre Meeting. It's an international network for the performing arts. And I met the first presenters in my life, the first producers, when I was like 26 or so. And I happened to meet people like Hugo de Greef, who was the founder of Kai Theater, and I learned such a lot from this person. So I think an important tool in networking is also to get to know people who give you a knowledge that you don't have, who can also show you ways of doing things that you haven't tried out yet, and where you get an idea that you didn't have before. So, and bring that back to the city you're working in. And any other observations you have in your current situation of things you might need and where you feel like you're bumping against a wall? Yeah?
Yeah, we are facing a big problem or obstacle that I'm doing a specific research, and I want to apply for residencies or opportunities to show my work that I've created already in the past. Like it's also under the same research. But the topics of residencies that are like the themes that they are having at the moment, my work doesn't fit there. Yeah.
Yeah. For this, I would recommend there is a nice lecture of Pia Kramer, who was the president of the European Dance House Network, who gave a lecture on residencies and how the decision-making process functions with most of them. Maybe that's an interesting thing to follow. Because the residency spaces often have a policy how they function and what they have to fulfill also for their how to say the aims they formulated for their politicians to get funding for their places. So maybe it's helpful also to find a way, like, I don't know, yesterday I saw famous Flemish dramaturg who was working with Alexander Rudy Leermans, for example, who was teaching in parts. I think this would be a person that I would possibly approach to define my goals a bit more clearly. And then you have on the internet, you have a lot of dance information centers where you can research what's happening in this area, and you could get in touch with those, for example, to find out about places you maybe don't know. You know, there are places in Scandinavia who are happy for every applicant because nobody wants to work in Bergen, of course, but even up north at the Lofoten, for example, where you are going to be in a very remote place, of course, with the most beautiful landscape, but they don't have as many applications as, let's say, Pakt Zollverein, where everybody wants to be, because everybody knows there are some important artists working there. So what's helpful is to gather knowledge from people you know about people who could help you further with that question. I'm not saying that Rudy Leermans would be the person then to tell you exactly the residency place, but he could possibly tell you which people to talk to. And that's maybe the secret of networking. Right now we are discussing about individual questions. How can I, from my perspective, get the things that I need? Yeah? But the whole idea of networking is important for solving these questions, yes, for your individual needs, but maybe also for the situation if you might think like, okay, in my city things don't go further, we need a production place, we need some more training, I don't know, other funding. I think the most important thing is to find allies in your place that are sharing the same interest. And ideally, if there is a situation that you have to improve as an overall situation, not just for your individual work, I think you should find as many allies as possible. So ideally, the whole community of dance in the place you're in, because this will give you a much bigger strength to also change the conditions you're in. If you try to imagine the situation when I started with these people complaining about the situation in Munich, the overall dance funding in Munich was 36,000 German marks, which is like 18,000 euros. Yeah. Meanwhile, the city of Munich pays like 2.5 million to the contemporary dance community. And of course, next to this, we have 2 ballet companies in the city, and there are facilities, festivals, and so on. I mean, they are included in this 2.5 million euro I was talking about. But there are possibilities to train, to produce, to present work, to also create interest with a larger audience. And all this has been created because people were, in the beginning, learning to collaborate. Before, there was like a huge opposition within the city. You know, when you were in this one school, you couldn't go to the other and the other way around. Yeah, because it was very clear, this is Ivanson, this is Tanzprojekt, and the rest didn't exist. So, and we learned from that, joined forces, and by describing the problems we were having, by putting that on paper, and creating a political paper together, yeah, and thinking about how can we follow up on this idea by clearly defining our common goals. And within the dance community, you can be sure that even you all think you are in the same situation, you wouldn't believe how different your goals are. Because if you're all thinking about we need production means, we need facilities to produce, there are so many different ideas how a production space would look like. Yeah? Would it be like this here with a white floor and like mirrors or whatsoever? Would it be a rougher space where you can build a set and the floor is not so important? So even for a rehearsal space, there are very different preconceptions how that would look like. And so I think the most important thing in networking and the transition to politics is to define your common denominator. Yeah? So there are many interests that go in a similar direction, but with a very individual approach. Yeah, everybody needs something slightly different. And at the end of the day, it's also about the question will be about the control of the resources. Yeah, there. From my experience, most people think it's the best if the resources are being controlled by themselves, because that's the optimal use of the resources. But the other people will have the same interest. So, and I've seen many initiatives that that weren't successful because people were immediately engaged with the question, who is in control of the resources then? Is it me who runs the place, or is it the others? Yeah. And this kills every common initiative. So when you're trying to formulate your common goals, you should be able to define it in a way that everyone who's involved in this initiative can find themselves in the common goals. So the common goals have to be formulated a bit wider than your individual needs. And the important thing would be to find out how can we define something we need in common in a way that we can all use it for what we want to realize there with the resources. Of course, when you reach your common goal, there will be a situation where it has to be defined who's in control of the resources. But it's very important at the beginning of an initiative to exclude that question or to agree on a way how that is going to be defined without defining it. That would mean, for example, let's take the idea of, I mean, has somebody been in the Tanztendenz München yet? This is a studio space with, it's 3 studios, 1,000 square meters. It didn't exist in the early 80s, but there was an initiative of 5 choreographers from Munich who were not the best friends at that time, but they agreed on a common denominator: we all need a space. Yeah. So we formulated a concept that there would be a production space for the local dance community, which was the 5 choreographers at that time, and that we would share that space. So everybody would get a different time period where they could work in that space. When they make a production, there was later on there was agreed there would be like a booking schedule. Some people would have priorities. If they have a premiere, they would have a priority for the space. When they have a rehearsal for touring, then there would be a second priority. If they are just doing research for something to happen, I don't know, next year, that's the third priority. But this priority we clarified after we got the space together. Before we all agreed we need that space, and we went to politicians to get that space. And it's very important to define that the way things are being made only in the period when it's already being realized. Because if you try to define that before you have it, you're gonna end up in quarrels with your fellow artists or the people who are sharing your interest already in a phase where you need the common energy to get an interest of people who are in control of resources, politicians, the people working in the office of the cultural administration and so on. But you maybe should agree on the procedure how that control is being handed out. For example, by saying, I don't know, we are fighting together for that space, but if we are getting that space, we maybe give a recommendation to our city administration in which way to distribute it, but we give the decision to them rather than to us. Yeah, that could be a possibility. But this is only one example. Every needs have different ways of doing it. So that would be a recommendation. Yeah, please.
I was just thinking because I don't know if this is a familiar situation for people outside Denmark, but in our school we're losing our building now because of a political decision. And in that sense, like, just because you're talking about like aligning with the politicians, and also in the decision of me wanting to stay in the city that I'm studying in, and also creating contacts with, it's quite a tricky, like I'm also thinking like how to, if I finish my education, choose to stay. I feel like the politicians already somehow kind of gave us a very, very, very bad compromise of what we originally had. And then in that sense it's a bit hard, because I thought like, do I really want to stay and try to negotiate with politicians that will probably always, give as little as they possibly can, so that we don't have anything to really complain about, but it's on a different level of quality. And I don't know, like,
it's just interesting to hear you speak about this, because it's also like at some point when we were fighting to keep our building for our school, like, and we went to the culture minister and we did a protest and everything, and at some point, like, when then you don't feel like that was not respected or taken in consideration at all by politicians of Denmark, then I thought, like, it's not even my country, like, what, why should I try more somehow? But then you also want to, because of course there's a lot of people in Copenhagen that wants to make it happen. But it's tricky when you feel that there are very minor politicians, like of the people in charge, that actually support what you believe, or like what the dancers believe.
So I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm afraid that this example you're giving is one of the worst examples possible for how politicians should work. I think that's about the school in Copenhagen that's moving on the countryside, because there's a company close by and they want to create a closer collaboration with the company. I don't know the exact situation there, but I heard about it when I was in Copenhagen, I think last summer. I think this is a very bad example. That's even worse than what I would have given you as an example, because when it comes to politics, the ideal situation would be that you have politicians who are informed about the detailed problems of the artists and would help you finding solutions how to solve that. I mean, there are some very good examples in the history, like French are still talking about the period of Jacques Lang, when he in the 80s decentralized the dance and the theater in choreographic centers and Maison du Théâtre. And this is the infrastructure that has been created in France that is still existing, and I think CNDC in Angers was one of the first ones. So this is a very good example. In this specific situation in Denmark, I don't know exactly what's the agenda of whom, but if that happens, it's mostly because there is a politician who has a personal agenda with somebody from the field who has a very strong input. Yeah, let's put it like that. I don't know who that person or interest group might be that is having direct access to politicians, but this is also a way of getting things through. I mean, we have a great organization here called a Bündnis of the production houses, for example. They get an awful lot of money from the national state, and it's because basically the former Minister of Finances, who is now our Chancellor, is living in Hamburg, has his voters in Hamburg, and there's a strong institution in Hamburg that managed to have a very good contact to that person. So it helps if you're, the Chancellor is your supporter. Yeah, but in this case, it might be the other way around. So there seems to be a large community, but there seems to be a smaller group with particular interests that has direct access to some politicians. This happens all the time in every place, but I think we would have to discuss about this case if I had more knowledge about it. And sometimes you cannot do anything about it because it's just like, I don't know, personal interest. I mean, sometimes you get a new infrastructure for performing arts, literature, or whatsoever, because there's one in the cultural office of the city who wants to be the director of it and pushes within the organization for this kind of place because they want to create a job for themselves. I mean, the world is full of these examples. Well, there's this example, yeah, politicians with a particular interest that goes against the interest of the majority of the dance community. But you also have the situation, you have politicians that are knowledgeable and they want to help you creating the situation you're in. I mean, both of it, I would say, are rather seldom models, you know, because normally politicians are only globally interested in things. So I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful, so I have to find a way to formulate these things. I think politicians decide on on different principles than we would decide about things. We would be interested in finding a solution for a problem. There is an artistic need to do things. There need to be resources, facilities to do that, and we have to find a solution for this problem to create a better situation for all. And we would think politicians are there to help us creating this. Yeah. But as a matter of fact, I think politicians are functioning in a different way, most of them. And the real world we are trying to change in its constitution for the needs necessary to really create something, yeah, is not necessarily the same for them, because a politician is going to be re-elected, yeah, if they do something good that is obviously perceived from a majority of the society as being good, and they have a positive communication about it. And this is where their motivation comes from. So they would accept it as a positive fact that you are happy with the result. Yeah? But from my experience, they don't care so much whether it's this result or that. The important thing is that everybody's happy. And that's the reason why I'm saying try to find as many allies for your initiative, because if you're all agreeing on things, it's the easiest thing for a politician to say, okay, then we give you the money, because then they are sure that there will be no complaints. In a political reality, it's always like this. If a politician takes a decision, you might be happy about it, but there will be a lot of others saying like, this is the most stupid decision that has ever been done. And as soon as they spend some public money on an initiative and they get a critique from the other side, it's not successful for them. Because the success is the acclaim. Yeah? The acclaim of as many people as possible. And the currency in life, and especially for politicians, is acknowledgement. Everybody wants to be acknowledged. Yeah? Everybody wants to be like doing things and getting a positive reaction on it by people saying, well done, or I don't know, for politicians, have a nice article in a newspaper where they are being mentioned, or I don't know, having a reception somebody where somebody is very thankful. I mean, don't overestimate receptions and so on and what's being said there, but I think the currency is acknowledgement. And acknowledgement for a politician is to do with the fact, do I get a positive public response? Yeah? Am I making as many people happy as possible? Am I possibly getting some voters from this at the next elections? It's really as sad as it is, but it's also good to know, because the more we are convinced about what is right for us, yeah, the more we are frustrated if we are finding out it's not what is right for them. But it would be impossible to find a connection. So to connect what is right for you with what helps them in their further political career.
We have a similar situation in Berlin. It's not
in
that
where?
In Berlin.
Yes.
It's not that our building's been taken away, but we're extremely underfunded, so that...
That's the HCT?
Yes. I didn't want to bring it up, but it's a struggle really, and it's been going on for years, and it leads to, because there's not enough money to have more professorships, that professors just get burnt out. So we constantly have to face with working with a professor for 1 year and they're gone, next one and they're gone. Like, it's just too much work, and the school, yeah, we need so much more money, and politicians are just not, we're not the priority, and we're part of a bigger university, the University of the Arts, and they get more money than the dancers. So it's like it's a constant struggle to keep raising the issue and keep being like, we're still here, we're still struggling, please listen to us. And then what happens is that new politicians get elected, so the ones you just had built a relationship with and they listen to, they're gone all of a sudden. So it's the new beginning. So I think we live in times where in general the arts are just not priority, I guess. Yeah, it's a similar kind of story where it's...
Could be the same about the Berlin Dance House, that I have been in discussions like 30 years ago, and it's still not there. And yeah, Berlin seems to be a very special situation also, because the city is basically bankrupt since many years already. And even though they might think we can do something for the artists, they have financial limitations. I think the problem with HZT is that it's between, I think, 3 universities, yeah, and it never, now it's only 2, it's UDK and...
HFS and...
Ernst Busch.
No, this is no, but I guess this is the organization.
Well, with HZT there was already a political mistake in the creation of it. Yeah, because it's in between the universities. No university feels responsible for it, and you're always like a parasite for the other departments. Don't worry, in other cities, if there is a dance department, it's always one of the weakest. If you go to a civic theater where they have like 3 art forms like opera, theater, and dance, dance is always the 3rd art form. Yeah. It has to do with, I don't know, hundreds of years of history in a civic theater, that people are used to opera. Then the plays came up, but since in literature you also have text, so there's more persistence in theater, because many people can read the text, and it was also part of the classical formation of the bourgeoisie to have a certain code of formation. And then the people come up with dance, I mean in the beginning with ballet, then with contemporary dance, but we don't have that history. So I can just say, like, don't give up. When I met Merce Cunningham to celebrate the 50th birthday of his company, when we invited him to Lucerne in Switzerland, where I had created a choreographic center within the civic theater. So I replaced the ballet director, and there were 30 years of ballet, but I was able, because my director was open for this idea, to create a choreographic center within the civic theater to produce and co-produce with independent artists within that structure. So this is all possible, but it depends on the people who are doing it. But when I talked to Merce Cunningham, who was around 80 at that time, how his life was, he said, like, you know, I got this famous prize that's normally given to economists and to researchers in science and so on. And he got that as a choreographer. And this was the first time when his brothers, who were famous lawyers in America, said to him, finally, I think your profession is important. But until he was almost 80, he has been even criticized in his family as doing a job that's useless. Yeah, even though he was worldwide renowned choreographer. So there are some strengths and weaknesses in the situation, that we are all working in the most ephemeral art form you can imagine, because you do a dance performance, and at the very moment it's taking place, it's there. But you cannot work with it by putting it in a museum and saying, okay, now you can all come and see this dance again, and this way we can create like a big societal energy around it. Yeah, that's our problem working in this art form. But at the same time, it's the most touching art form. It's the most human art form. It's the art form when you manage to get politicians there, that also creates something like a political momentum, because if you choose the right performance, they are really personally touched. Yeah. And HCT, I think, is a major mistake in the beginning. The initiative came from outside, from the German Cultural Foundation, to give money there. It was a little bit of an artificial construction at the very beginning, because there was a national funding scheme that wanted to interfere with the sovereignty of arts that lies with the federal states in Germany. And this is the major mistake in thinking. So, and I think this is why the other parts of the university think like, this doesn't belong to us. Yeah, I mean, when we would talk to Eva Maria Hörster or to Nick Hafner about that question, maybe they would have a more in-depth knowledge about that. But what I would say is like, if you're starting an initiative to come back to a wider interest, when you're starting an initiative, you also should think about how we can make it sustainable, and not only for a 5 years period. And the Tanzplan, in which it has been created at that time, was a 5 years project. And in the end, the universities were left with the question, who's financing it? Yeah. And this is the core problem that they are still dealing with. So in politics, it's always nice for politicians and also people who are sitting in cultural offices of cities or ministries. It's always nice to create a new impact, because they immediately get a positive response. Yeah, you did something new, wonderful. You are really a person that brings things further. But nobody wants to support infrastructure. Nobody wants to support the continuity of work, because they cannot create a new media output. They cannot create a new positive response. A constant expenditure creates a constant need for more money. Yeah, and this is politically not sexy, in a way. Like, it's always nicer to open a new house and being the one who founded it. There's only one politician I know, that's Veronika Kaup-Hasler, who she's the head of culture, what do you call it, cultural commissioner of the city of Vienna, Kulturstadtrat, and her first concept was care and repair. Yeah. So her predecessor has opened a lot of new venues and had a lot of press conferences, but all these venues had too little money to work after a while, after 15 years. So she went there and said, like, my concept is to equip the existing infrastructure with enough money and to take care that the artists are getting more money for their work, so that they get a fair payment working in the independent scene. And this only works because she comes from the field. She was a festival director before and a dramaturg and whatsoever. So she comes from the field and she knows exactly the needs. But this is the good example that we are all looking for. So yeah.
I have a question, because you talked about like getting in contact with politicians, but I wonder how would be like really practical. What would be like the first steps if you have like a couple of persons or initiative to, yeah, you want to do something or you want to get somewhere, and I wonder like how do you present yourself and how do you really get like the first steps?
So I can tell from my little experience when everybody was sitting in this bar together, which is not far from here, and I took the notes and I wrote a 2 pages text. Yeah, and the text was so, I mean, if I read it today, I have to have a laugh. Yeah. But at this very moment, I wrote that text. It was 2 pages. And the title was Dance Energy, Erkenntnisse und Strategie, acknowledgements maybe, and strategy for a city of dance in Munich. Yeah, big title for a small paper. But then I listed all the needs we had, and I added like a paragraph how we would change that. This didn't help us to get a production center for the community yet at that time, but I got an invitation to the cultural office of the city from a person that was responsible for music, theater, dance and literature at that time. Yeah, so only one person for 4 art forms. Yeah, so small was the cultural office of the city of Munich at that time. So I got an invitation to go there, and I went there, and she said like, oh, it's interesting to hear that there's an initiative that is outside of the 2 people I already know, the already elder choreographers at that time. And she said, we have a problem right now because these choreographers had to do 30 shows in the within the city to get 18,000 German marks each, and they didn't fulfill the regulations. So there are 36,000 marks or 18,000 euros on the table, which we cannot use for that. Do you have an idea for that? And this was funny because I came there and I wanted to have a production center for independent artists, and the initiative came from dancers basically. And we didn't get a production center, but we got an offer to get 18,000 euros to do something with it. So I brought everybody together, and also the established choreographer, and said like, why don't we do a festival showing the whole independent scene in the city together? And we did that as a collective organization in 1985 called Tanztage München, and we showed everybody who had a piece in the city. We did a 4 weeks festival which was sold out every night in 3 different venues, and this created a political impact. Yeah. Because suddenly politicians were there, the people from the culture office, and they found out, oh wow, we really have a dance community that goes beyond these 2 people. Yeah. But we also found out that since we are collectively organizing it, we thought like the other ones had called the press, and the others thought like this one has called the press, but as a matter of fact nobody has called the press. Yeah. So we had a 4 weeks festival sold out every night, and only 1 article because 1 journalist came accidentally. So so we said, okay, we have to improve it, and this was my beginning as a festival organizer, because then I said like, okay, then I do the central coordination, and next time we had a lot more success. But by doing these 2 festivals together, showing the city what a big public interest is here, and finding out that from, I don't know, 13 productions we showed in this time period, everybody was using the same dancers. So when we did that, there was always a quarrel who has the freshest dancers for the rehearsal. Everybody wanted to have the 2 hours in the morning, because in the afternoon they already had like 3 different rehearsals before, and they were totally wrecked and couldn't take any input anymore. So we went back to the city by saying, okay, we need a production space, and we need an ensemble that we can all work with, but we have to stretch it out throughout the year. And we came back with a proposition to create a production house, but then the initiative came from the choreographers rather than the dancers. But connected to this was also a facility to train and invite international teachers to train our community. So actually the original needs from that dancers initiative were included in a larger initiative, and this was the creation of Tanztendenz München, which is still there, and it's where we can do our workshops nowadays, and where almost every production that's being produced in Munich is being rehearsed. And this only came because extremely opposing artists were finding the common denominator by saying, let's have a core of like 4 dancers we can employ, and give some money to each choreographer to bring additional dancers into their productions, but having their own decision how to use their money. Yeah, and that's always important to create tools that and infrastructures and possibilities that suit everybody in the way they need, but they should be also able to decide about a part of the resources on their own and use it independently. Because the biggest value you have in the independent scene is the independence, yeah, which is shrinking more and more. The more money is involved in that system, the more the independence is shrinking. And I think that's the thing that should be most protected. For dancers, I would say on a regional and national level, the first initiatives mostly come from the production side, from the venues, from the festival organizers, in order to improve their situation because they are more visible. The dancers were often neglected in the political initiatives because it's so tough to make your life, to be in a production, to be able to pay your rent, and you normally don't have the time and energy to also go and do political work. But I would highly recommend to try to find time to be involved in that. On a national level, for example, in Germany, we have an organization called Dancers Connect, where dancers formulate themselves for, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 years, finally. But there are other initiatives that are much older. And you cannot expect that somebody who's working in a theater will create possibilities for dancers to be in control of the funding themselves. They will always create models where the venues or the festivals are in control. And for many years we had that. We created a funding scheme called the National Performance Network that uses the houses by funding the houses in order to pay the dancers better. Yeah. So they think like they get a lot of funding, but in the end it's to the benefit of the artist. And but not everybody does it like that. So. And Dancers Connect is, I think, a strong political energy meanwhile. And right now the discussion is also shifting from funding production to funding artistic process, or to funding artists, yeah, or to funding research, for example, and to take out the pressure of annually producing new work. So whoever is involved in a political process can change the result of this political process. And therefore it's important to also create your dancers alliances and of course to also analyze on which political layer we have to discuss with which question. If it's about production means in your local community, it's more important to lobby the political authorities rather than, I don't know, your cultural ministry or whatsoever. And this is something, by sharing knowledge, everybody knows something better than the other ones. Right now, for example, we have since 1997, we have an association called the Bavarian Association for Contemporary Dance, yeah, which got like 100,000 euros in the beginning. Then for many years we got 250,000 euros. Then we had a pandemic, yeah. And suddenly even the most stupid politician recognized that artists are living in a precarious situation because there was no more jobs on stage, there was no teaching, there was no bars being open where artists normally earn their money. So immediately we had a huge social problem in Germany, and I think in other countries as well. And this way politicians understood that they have to do something about the situation of the artists. So what we did is we allied with the organization representing the other art forms, and we were in a consultancy board to the Ministry of Culture, and within this Ministry of Culture of the state of Bavaria, and within this pandemic situation we consulted them for free for 2.5 years how to create their funding schemes for artists, for venues and so on. As a matter of fact, in the end they gave like 370 million euros to support the artists and venues and cinemas and scholarships and whatsoever. But as a matter of fact, this was the biggest expenditure they ever made for the independent art scene. Now we founded a steady conference on the arts that will follow up this process, and by only founding this organization representing all the art forms, the state of Bavaria gave already 3 million more for the independent scene on a regular funding, because they were afraid of the opposition that might come from that. So you can see that the motivations are always different from what you would think would be the right thing to do for what you need. you always have to consider what are the politicians' needs, and that's mostly public acclaim. Very, very simple. Yeah, and getting positive feedback from the scene. I got a sign that the battery is going to get off. Are we having 1 hour already? Yeah. Sorry, we could go on forever. I'm sure. I mean, the individual problems we maybe can discuss later on. But thanks a lot for all your contributions and for your awareness. And I wish you all the best for your further development. Yeah. Okay.